Philippines President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has arrived in the United States. He is set to meet his counterpart Joe Biden. The meeting is widely anticipated to further strengthen U.S.-Philippines ties. The meeting comes after both nations last week completed their largest war drills ever. The 4-day visit to Washington is a first by a Philippines president in over 10 years. Marcos Jr. says that his meeting with the U.S. president is significant for advancement of Philippines' national interests. Before leaving for Washington, he said that he is determined to seek a strong relationship with the United States. Biden and Marcos Jr. are expected to reach agreements on greater business engagement as well as military enhancements. The visit is part of a larger move to boost economic ties between the two countries. The U.S. administration has said that a presidential business delegation from Washington will also make a visit to Manila. But the larger focus is likely to be on the issues of security amid tensions with China. Manila and Washington have recently agreed to expand their cooperation in strategic areas of the Philippines. Philippines has also allowed U.S. to increase the presence of its troops in its territory. U.S. officials believe the strategic importance of Philippines cannot be undermined. Experts say that Washington sees Philippines as a potential location for rockets, missiles, in case of an invasion of Taiwan by China. Manila has sought to balance ties with both Washington and Beijing, but its dispute with China on territorial waters of South China Sea has made it unable to do so. On Friday, Philippines had accused China's Coast Guard of dangerous maneuvers and aggressive tactics in the region. This happened after a confrontation between a Philippine vessel and 2 Chinese ships in the South China Sea. US too had slammed China for the incident, calling it unsafe and provocative. The Philippines and China have a long history of disputes in the region, as China claims almost the entire South China Sea as part of its territory. Let's talk more about this. The great competition between the United States of America and China is only intensifying, especially after Chinese Coast Guard ship blocked a Philippine patrol vessel in the South China Sea. The United States of America has now warned that any attack on the Philippine vessels would trigger a U.S. response. The warning comes on the heels of the Philippines president's Washington visit. Ferdinand Marcos Jr. will be meeting his U.S. counterpart today as concerns grow regarding China's assertiveness in the South China Sea. Okay, so let's take a look at where the skirmishes are, or what is happening in the South China Sea, and what these drills involve between the Philippines and also the United States of America. This area here, the second Thomas Shore, is what I'm going to talk about. The skirmishes in the South China Sea happened on April 28th. That is when the Philippine Coast Guard said that 2 of its vessels were involved in the confrontation with the Chinese Navy in the disputed South China Sea. This is the South China Sea. You can see China here and the Philippines all the way here. So this is the disputed area, and this area is what I'm talking about, the second Thomas Shore. The incident occurred during a Philippine Coast Guard patrol close to the Philippine-held second Thomas Shore. Marcos' visit to Washington also comes after the U.S. and the Philippines completed their largest war drills ever. The 2-week exercise, called the Balikatan drills, involved more than 17,600 military personnel and also included live fire exercises. Let's tell you more about growing Philippines and the U.S. relations. Apart from the Philippines President Washington trip and the Balikatan military drills between both the countries, the United States of America also hosted 2 diplomats from the Philippines. During the talks, both the sides agreed to complete a roadmap for the U.S. to provide security assistance to its regional ally for the next 5 to 10 years. Last year, Washington also granted Manila $100 million to boost the Southeast Asian nation's defense capabilities and military modernization. Also in February, the Philippines granted new rights to the United States to expand access to its military bases. Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s father also visited the United States of America in 1982. It was Marcos's first visit to the United States in 16 years, since the first year of his presidency in 1966. Now, according to data from the Pew Research Center's Global Attitudes Project, 85% of Filipinos have a more favorable view of the American people. The survey further suggested that the Philippines liked the United States of America a lot. Meanwhile, in recent weeks, the United States of America is also making diplomatic inroads, holding drills and meeting their leaders. Just a few days ago, the United States of America signed the Washington Declaration Act with South Korea. It also opened its embassy in Vanuatu, here, and Solomon Islands. These are 2 islands which are in contention. Now, this was in a bid to counter China in the Pacific. Apart from this, Washington has also reopened its embassy in the Solomon Islands. Like I mentioned, the 2 islands are in contention. Meanwhile, China is also trying to rekindle its relations with various countries, especially after it brokered a peace deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Chinese foreign minister also visited Manila for 3 days to seek cooperation amid worsening relations between the Philippines and China. Let's also now tell you why the issue of South China Sea is so contentious. China claims almost the entire South China Sea, including the Spratleys. The Spratleys is around this region, which is also claimed by the Philippines. This has turned the South China Sea into one of the world's biggest flashpoints, especially as the US-China tensions rise. We're now being joined by Don McLean-Gill, Director for South and Southeast Asia, Philippine Middle East Studies Association. Don McLean-Gill, thank you very much for making time for We On Wild is One, and welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me, sir. True pleasure to converse with you on this.
Let me ask you, we've seen the US and the Philippines conduct military drills in the South China Sea. We've also seen Marcos Jr. heading to Washington, D.C. to meet President Joe Biden. What do you read from these two events? What is the message that Marcos Jr. and President Biden are trying to send to Beijing?
Right, and this is in fact a continuation of the promises President Marcos Jr. has made upon his victory, his election victory, that he would prioritize two particular aspects, and that is to enhance and secure Philippines' territorial integrity, sovereignty, and sovereign rights, and of course to be able to modernize and fast-track the modernization of the Philippine military with a special emphasis on maritime security. Now, of course, as we can see, the alliance is multidimensional and it involves a lot of qualifications to address series of threats. And of course, one of these threats include China's expanding assertiveness. And while Manila has, of course, sought to manage relations with Beijing, as I've always mentioned, there's always a discrepancy between what Beijing says at the political level and what it does on the ground. So this is, of course, a reaction to this particular discrepancy.
Don, why is the South China Sea so contentious, and why is it taking too long for that matter to be resolved?
Right. We have to understand in the context of the greater region, if you look into Southeast Asia or the greater Western Pacific, this is the traditional sphere of influence of the United States, whereas it is now becoming the locus of Chinese power, its rise, its assertive rise. And of course, what we can see here is that China has emphatically enhanced its anti-access area denial capabilities. And in fact, in 2018, as early as 2018, Philip Davidson emphasized that China has significantly controlled the South China Sea vis-a-vis the United States in all aspects short of war. So this is the situation that we're in now. China continues to militarize the disputed maritime territory because it acts as a particular shield, a geographic shield against U.S. expansion in the Western Pacific, or rather the enhancement of military operations of the United States in the Western Pacific. Right. So because of this particular complex situation, China's rise, U.S. desire to maximize its influence in the region, this will be a very sticky issue for a very long time. And, as we can see, it has been going on for decades.
Don, look, there's the issue of China expanding, still claiming Taiwan as its own, and some concerns that U.S. and the West might be isolating China. With that in mind, what is at stake here?
Well, we have to understand that I do not think that China can be isolated, the same way that they sought to do so in the Cold War. What we can say is that there's an effort by the West and, of course, like-minded countries in the Indo-Pacific to constrain China's ability to emphatically expand its assertive claims, its territorial interests, and its narrowly defined regional ambitions. And this, of course, will generate some sort of countermeasure from China. As you can see, China has sought to leverage on what it has significantly, that is its economic capabilities, using this as a form of salami slicing to get into the regional architecture of the Indo-Pacific. And in fact, we can see that China has utilized its influence slowly by creating fault lines within ASEAN, for example, and the Global Security Initiative, which is seen as a countermeasure, as an exclusionary form towards the U.S. alliance system in the Indo-Pacific. So we can see that there is a balancing and counterbalancing, not only in military affairs, but also in narratives and economic capabilities as well.
Don, as we wrap up this conversation, and I want your brief response to this, what do you predict will be the outcome of Marcos Jr. and President Biden's meeting?
Right. Very quickly, the outcome would be that both sides will agree that they have mutual concerns and set perceptions towards what is taking place in the region. They will try to deepen their alliance and hopefully broaden it as well. But of course, we can expect countermeasures from China as it also maintains its strength in the region.
Director for South and Southeast Asia, Philippine Middle East Studies Association, Don McLean-Gill, thank you very much for talking to We On Wild is One today. We On is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.